recorded. The chat is also being monitored by our program manager, Nick Horner, which most of you know as well. Feel free to post questions and or comments in the chat as well. And finally, we may address topics and ideas containing sensitive material. Let us remember to remain respectful, open, and growth-centered as a community. At the place George Mason University occupies, we give greetings and thanksgivings to the Doag ancestors, the enslaved and rightfully freed African Americans, and the Manahoic, Rappahannock, Pamunkey, Mattaponi, Upper Mattaponi, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Nansmoon, Manikin, Potawatomi, Nottoway, and Piscataway tribes who lovingly stewarded these lands past, present, and future. I invite you to acknowledge the indigenous stewards of the land wherever you are by writing their names in the chat. I'll start with a brief biography. In reflecting on his career in the theater during an interview with WBUR in Boston, P. Carl said, "I think you can see in my career a commitment to social justice and activisms. The questions of equity and inclusion, those questions are the whys of theater. In the career I've put together, I've not lost any of those passions." P. Carl is the author of the memoir, Becoming a Man, The Story of a Transition, which Publishers Weekly described as moving and captivating. He is the Distinguished Artist in Residence in the Department of Performing Arts at Emerson College in Boston, and was the Anschutz Fellow at Princeton University for the spring of 2020. He was awarded a 2017 Art of Change Fellowship from the Ford Foundation, a 2018 Berlin Prize Fellowship from the American Academy, and the Andrew Mellon Creative Research Residency at the University of Washington. His work has been published in New York Times Magazine, Boston Globe Magazine, and Lit Hub. His most recent work as a dramaturg includes Claudia Rankin's The White Card. Carl is currently working on the stage adaptation of Becoming a Man, commissioned by American Repertory Theater, with Tony Award-winning Diane Paulus slated to direct. Operating from the core belief that theater is for everyone, Carl seeks to use the power of live performance in concert with opportunities for international dialogue and activism to foster personal and political transformation through the shared experience of art. Carl is the founder of the online journal HowlRound, and when discussing the genesis of that publication, he notes, when you open the door, when you say anyone's welcome, a lot of people who haven't felt welcome come through. Please join me in welcoming artist, activist, and scholar P. Carl to the virtual stage. Welcome, welcome.
Great, that's a lovely introduction. Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Our paths haven't crossed in a very long time, as we've established with each other, like 20 years plus.
Yeah, so in that range, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But it's a pleasure to get reacquainted. Welcome. I'd like to start by asking you about your background. I think all art is informed by culture, identity, history. I'm always curious about how life experience and creative practice converge. Can you tell us a bit about the communities you've inhabited, about how they have influenced, grounded, nourished, and or challenged you, how those communities and experience inform the stories you tell?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll try to. I'm so old now; it's hard. I'll have to condense it here. But yeah. I mean, I'm from Elkhart, Indiana, which is the recreational vehicle capital of the world. It's a very little small town in the Midwest, and I grew up in a family that didn't have much in terms of means, and so really felt a lot of pressure to figure out how to survive financially. And I think that had a, that's a thing that always stays with you, I think, when you grow up that way. And so, and also had a lot of impact on my sense of wanting justice for others, I think. And then, gosh, that influence, and then certainly, the kind of period of my life where I came out as gay prior to transitioning. And then I discovered the entire world of queer culture, which suited me in a way that I realized why high school and all other things had been so miserable socially. And actually during that time, one of my favorite things was to go to a place called Patrick's Cabaret and watch Joel do his thing. I don't know, Mighty Real. I had to think about Mighty Real, this week. Oh man, I love that show. I still love that show. I'd like. Do you ever do it ever? I mean, I'll keep going. I'll ask you questions later. Spent a lot of time in Minneapolis. Did my PhD at the University of Minnesota. I did a master's degree in peace studies at the University of Notre Dame prior to that. So that's I always say the master's in peace studies has had a big influence on me, that I've always wanted to enter a world of social justice in a way that is inviting versus conflicting. And I feel like I spend a lot of time facilitating hard conversations because I really believe in the need we have to connect, and that we often have more in common when we know each other than we think we do.
Wow, that's great. Do you feel like that was sort of an innate facility you had? Obviously, it was forged over time and experience, but did you study how to facilitate difficult conversations, or was that something you had in you as well?
I mean, I think it's partly, natural. I like to bring people together, but I also feel that some of it comes from spending a lot of time studying and researching. And so I also feel informed when I'm doing it. And when I'm not informed, I don't do it,
Right.
And so I think that gives me a sense of confidence when I'm doing it, that if I've chosen to, then I know, I feel good about doing it.
Yeah, it's great. And well, how timely that facility is right now. Because like institutions of higher learning everywhere, George Mason University is in the throes of difficult but necessary conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This guest artist series actually seeks to further that conversation by developing more awareness of the ways in which the underrepresentation of marginalized voices persist in the American theater, becoming more familiar with artists and scholars of color engaged in conversations for radical change and racial justice, and cultivating more comfort and proficiency when talking about race, power, and privilege. And when I'm talking about anti-racist theater, I'm talking about more inclusive theater that not only rectifies racial disparity, but theater that bolsters and centers women, members of the queer community, disabled folk, other marginalized identities. And for some of us, of course, our identities are inextricable. And multiplicity, right. I was, in reading your book, Becoming a Man, A Story of a Transition, I was struck by how courageously you tackled how your transition provided such new perspective. I'm going to quote you here, so buckle up. No. I came into being a white man in 2017. White male supremacists occupy the White House. Immigrants are deported and denied entry to the United States. Black lives don't matter to the politicians controlling Congress. I am announced to the world as a man 8 months before the hashtag #MeToo movement will fill our social media and news feeds. And for those in earshot of this conversation who have not had the pleasure and privilege of reading the text, I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that statement a bit.
Sure. I transitioned really, in the world of transition, I guess late in the game. Had a long history of living in another identity, as I say in the book, once the door opened for me to transition, it was the most natural and easy thing for me. But in terms of just feeling in and of my body, but it was a complete disruption for the world, and I think and a bit of a shock. I had spent a lot of time in my life talking about white male privilege, and then when you suddenly have it, it's quite embarrassing, actually. And I talk about that in the book. People are, I don't know, valeting your car and calling you boss, and you're like, no, 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 no. I mean, like, it just these kinds of ways in which we've racism is just part of every encounter and in the foundation. And suddenly you're at the park, and it's early morning and it's dark, and you see a woman alone with her dog, and you realize that she's frightened when she sees you. I mean, just the ways in which your body represents something entirely different depending on the context it's in. And so I think there was a lot of for me like trying to figure out how to navigate that privilege, and also just people do it. Like, I mean, my wife would call to get something done, and then I would call and it would be done in 1 minute, and there's just this kind of like boys club, and it's weird. It's a very weird thing. So
yeah, I mean, I had never heard that journey articulated in quite that way, so it was really for me, at least, it was very eye-opening. You know what I mean? I appreciated it. I'm actually in the throes. Actually, we have a show that opens in our production season on Friday. And it takes place in 2017. And part of the reason that I focused on that year is that I believe it truly was an inflection point, right, in American history. So many issues had started to converge with the election of who.
It's funny. That's when, of course, the Kavanaugh hearings were happening then too, which was just so egregious. So again, just oh my God, watching Kavanaugh cry. But a funny story about that year, which is I've turned the book into a possible TV show. The pitch was was purchased by a studio, and so we're starting to work on the pilot now. But the pitch started in 2017, and the one note that the producers gave was, 2017 is too depressing. We don't want it to start there. Which I was like, what?
Too much going on.
Yeah, TV. Let's not make people feel uncomfortable and depressed. Yeah. So, but I was like, what? But that's kind of like where it's these are the things you navigate.
I was going to say, but that's the purpose of diving in.
I know.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, the flip side of your sort of realizations, right, once you had transitioned, was that it must have given you much more insight about your experience, and what people perceived you, right, as female. Had you ever thought about them in the same way, as presenting as a white woman? Or
it's hard to explain this. I talk about it in the book, but I never felt ever like a white woman. I mean, I never felt like a woman, period. I felt white, but I feel like a woman. And so when I say in the book, when I was talking to you, I was talking to you always as a man, like, or a boy. And then I would be treated like a woman. And I would be like, and the disconnect for me was just, I couldn't understand what how people were responding. And so it's been interesting now to have those things sync up, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways, but I mean, sometimes in
Yeah,
ways from a privilege, but yeah, it's a funny way for me of that I just never, I don't know what I thought. I just think I didn't think about. I mean, you just, like
yeah, you just sort
you
of
check the box,
were, yeah,
yeah, I was
very
a
interesting.
head person. I was theoretical and creative, like everything
Yeah,
was out
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. And I actually, thank you for that. I actually I wasn't sure where you landed on this before we spoke last week, but you do identify as queer. And and then actually I went back to your book in which you articulate your position very well. Again, I'll quote you, please indulge me. uh, Queer became the word of the decade in the 1990s because of its inclusive qualities unfettered by biology. Queer could hold differences and sameness more readily than feminism, including drag and butch and femme and every articulation of the gender spectrum. Um, Talk to me a little bit about how your identity and experience as a member of the queer community has informed your work as an artist, as a scholar, as an activist.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I say this in many ways. I lead a double life. I don't obviously wear a sign that says I'm a trans
Yeah,
person, uh, and and I'm not a person who feels like just in my life it's necessary to announce. So I live in rural Rhode Island, and mostly I live as a man here, and then I drive to Boston to teach, and I'm the only trans professor, and all of the queer students and trans students find me.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and I think the way in which my queer identity is it. I mean, I feel like I'll just, I have a lot of students reach out to me, some who don't even aren't in my classes, and will say the biggest question I get is like how will I have a life? And what I realize when I talk to them is they don't know anybody, over 23 who has
yeah,
transitioned, has a job, is living with the a modicum of comfort, and so I become for them this kind of singular, oh, I might live,
yeah,
to
yeah,
see
yeah,
that and to
yeah.
succeed. And what would it, can you tell me how? And
Mhm,
but I
mhm,
find that that part of my queer identity as somebody recently called me an elder, which I found quite offensive. But I was like, elder? Don't call me a. You can think it, but don't say it out loud. And but I think that role of
yeah,
just seeing a lot of history and how queer has functioned. It's an important part of my life, and it kept me, before I was able to transition, it kept me in a world where I could still explore
yeah,
parts of myself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think you touch upon something which I've experienced, of course, now being in academia all these years. Often it's just your presence that really, really positions you as a leader, because you, for many, represent something, as you said, they can look at you and see, okay, there is the possibility of a future here. I can get past whatever point this difficult time is, whether it's about transitioning or other parts of
Yeah.
identity. So yeah, I mean, I teacher
Yeah.
certainly it's
Yes.
informed your work as a teacher. I
Yes.
can see that
For
very
sure.
much. And also, I think the fact, that you have told your story very publicly also uh, positions you once again as someone who can sort of reveal a pathway forward. I know it's your pathway, but hopefully it empowers someone else to figure out what their own pathway is, right? If you,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the book has had different
yeah,
things for people, but you really do it for. I mean, it's a very vulnerable thing, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could even write it now. I purposely wrote it as it was happening, and just sort of let it
Mhm.
go. And but I think the vulnerability piece is so critical for other people to know that they can survive that vulnerability. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that even for parents will reach out to me. Obviously, people who are transitioning, older people who want to transition, and I also get a lot of white men reaching out to me saying, "Oh my gosh, this has changed the way I think about masculinity."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just think you put it out there and hope that it
Yeah.
does good, as many good things as it can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's happening, Carl. I really do. We talked a little bit last week also about the idea of a queer aesthetic. Do you think there is a queer aesthetic?
Well, I mean, it was funny you asked me that, and then I did catapult right back to the '90s. And there was like, I was like, oh my God, I'm in the '90s. I was like, Lois
Yeah.
and Peggy Shaw, and
Yeah.
Menopausal Gentleman, and Mighty
Yeah.
Real, all the things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there has been a way in which queer people have always made art in a way that creates community. And what that looks like, obviously, it varies, but I think there's a way in which, in general, and again, not all queer people, but in that kind of universe of that I grew up in, it was a universe of breaking rules, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Breaking form, right? Being willing to say there isn't a norm, and there isn't a path that is the only way. And so I think the queer aesthetic for me has always been the freedom to think outside of what is expected, what you're trained to do.
Yeah.
I teach a course at Emerson called Burning Down the House,
Mhm.
Disruptive Narratives in Theater and Life. And
Mhm. Mhm.
I think they think I'm joking when I name the class, but I disrupt the class constantly and break
Yeah.
rules constantly. And,
Yeah.
periodically I lie. And then, I mean, you just do all sorts of things to sort of, create this kind of
Right.
pedagogical chaos,
Yes. 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 Yes.
because life is chaos. And that is what, if you're going to be an artist, that's what you're going to be maneuvering all the time. So I think that I learned that from a lot of queer artists.
I love that explanation, though. So about the queer aesthetic, as I go back and forth, toggle between. Well, of course there is. Well, there's isn't everything. It depends on who's making the art, and all of that. But right. But the idea, one of building community, certainly, I think, it's been a way of doing that. Certainly, I think of breaking the rules. Well, the very fact that we walked into the spotlight has already broken the rule, because our stories weren't supposed to be told. Historically, those stories have never seen the light of day. So there's something in that as well. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you and I would not know each other if there weren't a queer aesthetic, right?
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah.
That's right. That's right. I first met you at the Playwrights Center.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I see Eric N is on the call here. Maybe we'll get to
Oh,
him.
Eric.
Oh, yeah.
Hello,
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I see his. I saw his name. I did not see his. I mean, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's his name.
So a couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up actually for the other guest here. If you had to offer one strategy for creating a more inclusive theater, what might that be?
Oh my gosh. It's been interesting. I'm having this conversation with my students, and this is a kind of nebulous answer because I'm actually thinking a lot about that. But I think the one of the things that's happened is we think about time and in such a short way, and
Mhm.
I think the sense of not enough time leads to not enough care. And so for me, stretching out time to make room for care is sort of what I think about in terms of the best advice for how to make theater that is not only, powerful theater, but respects all of the bodies that are making it along the way. And I've always found theater to be a kind of brutal sport, a little bit of a blood sport. How long can you survive, and who's going to kill you? And you're seeing it play out now with all of the controversies that blow up on Twitter every 5.5 seconds. And I think we need more care, and that takes time.
Yeah. Building it into the creative process or the space that. Great. Who is creating theater that inspires, challenge, awakens you right now?
Oh gosh, there's so many people. I mean, I hate to even answer that because I love so many writers. I worked at the Playwright Center, so I love so many writers, and I mean, I love Eric N is a writer I've loved. Obviously, I worked a lot with Claudia Rankin on the White Card. I've always been passionately in love with Robert O'Hara's work, and I think he's crazy and fun and wonderful.
I have to admit, he scares me a little. I've never met him.
Yeah. We made a play together, and I was like, oh my god, it was so great. It was really good. And Lisa D'Amour has always been a rule breaker, somebody whose work I've really liked. So but a lot. I mean, I'm a lover of a lot of writers. So
yeah, that's great. So at this point, I invite everyone in the virtual room to shift to gallery view and turn your cameras on if you feel comfortable doing so. This is about community building. Again, I'd like to see as many of your faces as possible. Please. Just remain muted until you speak. And if you want to raise your real hand or your virtual hand, I will try to recognize you, or you can put something in the chat and we can do it that way as well. All right. Any comments or questions? Or yes, hi Eric, long time no see.
What a great thing you have here, Joel. I'm glad I found my way to it. And
thank you.
Great to see you again. Since I was shamed by name, I just thought I'd weigh in. You say you're a lover of a lot of writers, and I just want to say that a lot of writers love you, that you really given your life to the service of creative expression. So thanks. And then to maybe underscore some threads that I've responded to, this idea of caretaking really seems at the forefront of innovation. The idea that art has a healing capacity, and there's been a rip in the fabric, and we need to knit together, and theater seems to be instrumental to that. What it asks, and what you've demonstrated, is it asks for radical honesty, that you recognize the world as it is and yourself as you are. And then finally, that you make a move from a misplaced self, or a dishonest self, or an exiled self, from the self, the terrifying leap into the human, so it's not just a leap from the self to another self, but you find your way into the collective, into social being. And that's where theater can be a part of the healing process, this rehearsal of the social self.
That's right. Yeah.
So stimulating ideas.
That's great, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's right. But, I will say, in the world of time, one of the things I did in 2017 was leave the world of administrative theater, which I had been in for a very, very long time, and began to do all my own thing and my own writing, and it was really joyous, but I really started to think a lot about. I guess I just started to think a lot about how do we connect with each other, and one of the things I found, by about 2020 or so, was I didn't know how to be in conversation anymore around questions of identity. I felt that I felt the conversation had turned so not complex in the way that it was being carried out in the crucifixion. Sorry about that word, but just the destruction of it. And theater people who I love destroying each other. And, I realized I didn't have anything to say. Which was the first time in my life I had nothing to say. I didn't know what words, we didn't have any words that were useful, and there wasn't time ever to have constructive, nuanced conversation. So I disappeared, and I started to bird watch, and just went into a period of about a year and a half of being alone, more or less. I did some things in there, but did some teaching and things, but and just stopped talking, and photographing birds. And then I just started to make handmade field guides with my photography, and I would just make them, and then I would send them randomly to people in an envelope. And they're, enormously time consuming, and but it really taught me about how to think about communication, and how to demonstrate care, and how much time it takes to do that. And I was always feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe how much time I'm spending on this. And then I'd be like, no, this is what I'm, the voices in your head. But the difference that time has made to other people, and the difference is made for me, it's been really eye-opening, I think.
When you talk about that time period, it's almost like my memory of that time period. I still think we're coming out of it, perhaps. We seem to have lost the vocabulary to communicate with each other, so the community is built on communication, and
Yeah, we're missing language or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something continues not to be right. So
Yeah. Thank you. Other thoughts, comments? I think everybody's just absorbing all you've said, Carl.
Anything. I'll answer just about anything.
Yes. There we go, Eric. Beautiful art. Birding.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All of those things.
What are you most, I'll ask a question I'm curious about. What are you most excited about right now, Carl, that you're working on? Because I know you've got a number of irons in the fire.
Yeah. The things I should be most excited about are not always the things I'm excited about. I'm excited to be making this TV show, in the sense that it will be a first, if it actually goes to series, which is the many things that can go wrong are, such that it may not, but the idea of it is very exciting to me. I've adapted the book into a play. It's still being developed, but everybody had agreed to produce it like 2 days before COVID, and so it's just been sitting, and so we now have revisited it, and we are going to workshop it in February, and then it should see a premiere at some point, and I'm excited to be back in the rehearsal room and making that show. It was a lot of fun to start the process of it, and I really love collaboration. I learn so much, and because it's about my life, I can't really see a lot of things that other people can see. And so I learn a lot in collaborating. The book was not as collaborative, obviously, and as books are, you have a good editor, but I'm really interested in how these collaborations will go. I have a writing partner in the TV show, and the stuff that she comes up with is so incredibly hilarious, and I just couldn't think of it in a million years, and it's fun. And then I'm very the thing I'm actually probably most excited about is I'm writing the next book, which is very bird inclusive, and that's sort of my obsession. And so I don't really like to interrupt that very much, but so that book is the thing I'm most excited about. But I'm going to try to focus in on the things that are going to happen first. So
that's great. That's great. Have you done autobiographical work before this book, the memoir?
I mean, I had not published a book before, but you know, when I started HowlRound, I published all the time, in part just for content because it took a while, you know. And so if you ever get super bored in your life and want to go back and read the I don't know 50 essays I wrote over 10 years, they're all autobiographical, so I've always written in that form.
Okay. That's great. And HowlRound is a great resource. And we teach a graduate course here, 651 Theater, Criticism, and Theory, in which one of the deliverables is actually an article that gets published on HowlRound. So
very cool. Very cool. That's great.
Yeah. I'm responding to something here in the chat from Wilbur Harrington. Love the disruption approach. What's not being talked about now that should be in theater today, or what would be a great disruptor for audiences and creators today?
Oh gosh, I could think of I think of several thousand things that could disrupt the theater. You know, I feel like the biggest disruption to the theater would be for us to have communication that was open and honest and risky and scary. I mean, I teach a class at Emerson. I'm teaching this class, right? My disruption class, my burning down the house class, and I have 14 theater students, and we go there, you know, we talk about everything. And what they say to me is they never talk about these things because everybody's too afraid to speak. And so the students, I think, are quite capable of having conversations. I think our job as educators is to create spaces that make hard conversations possible. And so I think that's hard work. And again, it takes time and care. But for me, I feel like the biggest disruption in the theater would be to stop tweeting altogether and just start to talk to each other about the things that we really think and feel, and deal with the fact that those are going to be hard conversations and that we can survive them. So I feel like that would just be entirely radical, to be honest, as I've seen all these ugly things play out.
Yes. That's a great response. Yeah, as the world has shifted, I think also, as you said, sort of flexing the muscle about how, you know, how do we speak in real time, in person, you know, even though I understand the necessity often, like I'm in rehearsal right now, so we're shifting to sort of sending my notes to the actors, you know, to a virtual forum. And there's something, I understand the imperative because of time, but I don't want us to lose the facility to communicate in person. I feel like that's so vital, you know, and that's something we have to continue to reinforce and support. Wilbur has a hand up. I will acknowledge you, give you the floor.
Thank you, Jill, and apologies again for the non-video, but we'll save all that. The question that comes to mind, and I appreciate your response to the disruption about being able to have more open and honest communication, both within the audiences as well as on the creative side. I'm curious to get your reaction to how do we go about having more honest and open conversation and going there when we seem to be prevented by the hesitation around triggering and responding to that. And so there's sort of a conundrum of wanting to go there, but we can't go there because of having to check all the boxes of the things that may trigger an audience member or society. So I was just curious about your reaction to that.
Well, this is probably what I'll be thrown out of the conversation when I answer, but I'm just going to answer honestly because I said that honest communication is important. One of the things that's happened, I'll do it in the form of a quick story. With my play is the first, we've not been able to find anyone to cast. It took 2 years to find someone to cast it because no one would cast it because they were not trans. And so they refused to cast my play, which was something I'd never encountered in the theater. I was really curious about how they were helping me by being trans activists, not casting my play. And I thought it kind of represented the sort of the far end of the ridiculous of what's happened in the theater. And then I think, but these are nuanced, I think very, very nuanced conversations. And then the other thing that's happened as we're now starting in a rehearsal process is we have to have consultants in the room, HR people essentially. And so I've been studying gender my entire life, and I have to have a gender consultant in the rehearsal room. My feeling about that is, and it's because if somebody gets triggered, they have to be able to go to somebody, and I feel like if somebody gets triggered, we have to stop to talk about it. That's the work we do. I mean, that's what art making has always been. Now, don't when I say that, I'm not saying that theater version room hasn't been a really abusive space and that there aren't things that need doing to make that space not that. But I think trigger's a word that is, I think we think it means one thing, and I think it can mean many things. I was talking to Lisa DeMore recently about this, and they're doing a thing at Brown. When they're in rehearsal, they say button. And I liked button quite a bit. I've never heard this of you. Maybe you all do it, but they, and button can be just, don't use that word, or that word does that to me, or, and it can also mean I'm going to take a 5-minute break and step out. But it takes it doesn't weight everything the same, right? And I think part of the problem is we often are weighting everything the same, and if all things trigger, I think we just have to risk it, and I think we have to create a space where we're constantly talking about we're risking that with each other, and that is, and then I think we don't need intermediaries at every turn. I was a consultant to the musical Jagged Little Pill, and they must have had 75 consultants in the end. I was one of a few to start, and I've never seen a group of producers try harder to do the right thing, make a bigger mess. And if you had put more people in that consulting role, it was just a disaster, and I think the desire to preempt triggering created so much triggering, and it opened space for triggering. And I think we can't preempt it. I think it's life. Life is a big, fat, ugly trigger. And so, I mean, it is. I mean, I don't know who doesn't I get triggered every single day, and I'm not reducing any of that, but I think it's like we have to find a way to make a rehearsal room a place where we can survive that. And that doesn't mean there aren't abusive people who need to not be in the rehearsal room at all, and they just need to be fired. We need to, we had this at Emerson, and he was fired, I mean, so I think there's that, and then there's like conversation that can happen. So it's so hard because it's a question that it requires context. How do we handle it in this context? How about in this context? But a great question.
Yeah, great question. Difficult one too. Eric, is that your hand going up? Yes. No, just okay. Bye-bye. Good to see you.
See you, Eric. Good to see you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, that is a very good question. Certainly one that I struggle with in terms of even the content of the material that I present now, the dramatic literature. I have to vet it in a completely different way, be aware of it. And like probably most classrooms everywhere, there's a discussion about community agreements, you know,
Yeah.
and I probably like you, Carl, I probably are more on the conservative side. It's like, okay, if the word blood, for example, is going to be triggering to you, how, you know, I mean, how are we ever going to envelop all of the possibilities and still do the work? Because I think part of the work is challenging ourselves and audiences, of course, to think and feel differently about the world and ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes it means pushing up against things that make us very uncomfortable, you know?
Well, you know, it's interesting. There was a big controversy about 1776, and people know that musical. It's just about, not just about, but the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and you know, the whatever 2 days before the signing. This is in the musical and in life. The 2 days before the signing, the only way they can get it signed, of course, is to make sure that Black people are not included in the notion of freedom, right? And so there was a lot of conversation in the reviewing of that about, oh, this is a play that is done, shouldn't be shown anymore, blah, blah. And you know, I went to see it on Broadway, and it's so horrible, like it in the way, horrible in a good, like in a good way. Like July 4th comes, right? Like, so you had this moment, this horrible moment where Black people are not going to have freedom. That's the only way we're going to sign it. And then July 4th is like fireworks, right? And celebration, and we sign the thing. And, you know, I mean, I've never been a big July 4th fan, but man, I'm like, oh my God, you know, I'm never, for a kind of mainstream audience, they're never going to be able to think about July 4th the same again, we hope, you know? And so I think sometimes, like, you know, like the desire to get rid of it really undermines the opportunity to show, look what we did. And now we see it's just so ugly. And I can imagine it being shown in 1969 and people going, hoo-hoo, we signed the Declaration of Independence, you know? And now we're just like, I was like, ooh, we signed the Declaration of Independence. It's really gross how we did that,
Really
you know?
gross. Right.
So anyway, you know, these are complicated, you know, it's complicated.
They are. And I don't feel like one size fits all. I mean, we're obviously in this place as a culture having these conversations, which we couldn't have 50 years ago, or certainly not through the same lens that we're having them now, right? It's going to shift again. 20 years from now, the lens will be different yet again. Who knows where this generation will take it? So I don't know. Other thoughts, comments, questions? You've stumped us all, Carl. Kevin has
I killed you all with boredom. I'm apologizing. I'll try to be more interesting.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask one question. I'm frozen. There we go again. So with students, and I'm a designer, and I teach our students design, particularly sound design. That is my area, and I'm trying to work with them on changing how we collaborate and look at everything where we are today versus where we were 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Is there anything that you would recommend that I could give them in terms of confidence and saying, okay, things are going to get better? What, you know, those kinds of things.
Well, I think things have to get better, because I think there won't be theater otherwise, right? So I really believe that we're not going to have theater if we don't make change, right? I think there's that. And then I think, you know, that one of the things I talk a lot with faculty who are doing design or doing, you know, especially with people who teach acting and that kind of thing. And, you know, a lot of ways that I always suggest bringing in as many people who represent that kind of future that is possible for your students, and how they're living that out. I think that is a way to say, you know, I mean, look, I'm, you know, I've been in the theater a while. I'm actually ready to cede all power and control and retire to birding. But I think the idea that, you know, my work now we have a bunch of young faculty who've just come in, all the new hires, and not always young in age, but young in faculty. And I really see myself as kind of a bridge to get them into places where they will be running, the show once they have tenure and that kind of thing. And so I think using the expertise you have to really bridge opportunities and show students what those opportunities might be, I feel like that's the role of us more mature people who've been teaching for a while. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
That's very helpful. Thank you. I mean, I look at it and I'm just trying to figure out the best way. I mean, I go through a whole bunch of exercises with them. We talk about things all the time. And I said, this is to be, and I can tell you, we've done much better, but we have a long way to go. So I mean, that's kind of what I go through with them a lot. So
yeah, it's the work now. You can't separate the technique from that work,
Yeah. Other thoughts, questions for Carl? It sounds like, well, obviously, if you're at Emerson, right, you're in a metropolitan location where the demographic is very, very diverse, right, and becoming much more so even as we speak, as it is all over the place. And at George Mason University, we're certainly at this inflection point where we're looking to present more work that really reflects the diversity of our student body. And the difficult thing is, I think, while the university is very, very diverse, our small school, our unit, is not so much as much. It is growing, it is changing, but as it does so, we want to create work, I think, that pushes sort of representation and inclusion. At the same time, provides opportunities for the students who are really, really engaged in the work here, right? I don't know if you've had that experience at Emerson or other institutions where you've taught, but if you have any insight or strategies that you'd love to share, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, we're in the thick of one of these. We have a controversy every 35 seconds around this exact issue, and so I've been mediating one this weekend, in fact, and I think Emerson's had a similar issue of you couldn't do certain plays because you didn't have enough actors of color to do them, right? And now we're at a place just now where, with this freshman class, I think that is changing, but it really raises the question of what in the meantime, or what then. And what I found in talking with the students is often none of the solutions feel good. And I think, the controversy we're in right now is a play being switched out for another play. And, when I sort of really got down to, like, is it the other play that you hate? It's like, well, it's really just, they just hate how it's all been for so long. You know what I mean? And so I think trying to get at that and really, I think I created a new course that I'm going to teach next semester called Inhabiting Bodies, something, I don't know. I always have these long titles. I forget what I titled it, but one of the things that this is, Robbie McCauley used to do this, wonderful performance artist. I'm sure Robbie, and at Emerson. I'm sure she did it better than I will be doing it, but she did a version of this, which is, the students are going to write monologues in bodies that are not theirs. And one of the things that we've lost track of is that we are educators, right? So this is not a monologue they're going to do on Broadway, right? And they probably shouldn't do it 5 steps out of the classroom, right? But if we are not going to keep trying to know each other and use theater as one of the ways we know each other, so it's going to be really interesting to see how incredibly uncomfortable it's going to be. And then they're also going to write a monologue that is them. Right, so they get to inhabit somebody else, and they get to inhabit themselves. And I think that. We'll see how it goes, but I think it's like just continuing to try to get people out of the idea that we are 2 dimensions,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I really loathe people like thinking, you know, that the only thing I have to offer is being a trans person. I mean, I'm like, that's just like a piece of me, you know, it's
Yeah.
a piece, it's a life-saving piece, but I have a lot of other things that I'm interested in chatting about, and I could be invited to a lot of things.
Yes, yes, you could.
You
Yes,
know,
you could.
not just queer things, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody wants to be anybody interested in being two-dimensional here. I don't think anybody wants that. So
No, no.
I'm like, how do we get us all to
Yeah.
3 dimensions
Yeah.
or
I love that. I love the idea of that course. And yes, Robbie McCauley was a dear friend and mentor to me. Yeah, I was able to participate in a tribute to her several years ago, which she was there for, which was wonderful. Another friend teaches a course. You may know her, Kim Moore at Brown University. Yeah, she teaches a course called Outside the Box, where she challenges young acting students to do exactly that, to perform a character that is very, very close to their own identity, demographic, and then to perform two that are different gender and different sort of racial identity.
it's so funny because Lisa Demore was just here and said you have to have meet, you know, Kim and
Oh, well, there you go.
yeah.
There you go.
So I'm only 30 minutes from Providence, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
made myself
absolutely.
a note to make sure I do it. That's great.
Yeah, check it out. And I think she's written some scholarship about that process, and also how student reception to that process has shifted dramatically over the last few years, you know, and obviously cultural appropriation is a thing.
Yes, it's real. Yes.
It's a thing,
Yeah.
but that's not what we're asking students to do. As you said, how do you get to know someone else's experience? How do we get to know each other? How can we imagine someone else's experience, background, history, culture, right? If we are unwilling to even open our eyes and look, right? So.
Well, you know, Twilight was a really interesting example of that. You know, the Anna Deavere Smith's Twilight.
Yes.
I don't know if you probably know all these, but if you go back and listen to any of her talks in the mid '90s, they are. I mean, she was so far ahead of what was all the rest of us in terms of what was coming. And you know, one of the things she's always does everything, you know, without shoes, because her world is stepping into other people's shoes. And you know, Twilight, of course, she plays, you know, what, 35 characters or however many. And then when they remounted Twilight this past year, they, you know, I think was 5 characters, and because, you know, it was no longer okay for one person to play all of those characters. And you know, I had several thoughts about that. One was maybe it's just Anna Deavere Smith's play to do, but also it was interesting, my students saying, oh, it was more comfortable to, you know, have 5 characters, and sort of, you know, the production sort of kept everybody in their identity in the first half, and played with it a little bit in the second half. But I just think of her work as so groundbreaking, and now it would be impossible for that work.
I think so. I mean,
impossible.
But you know, she and, you know, other people who got Nagila's son, and what's the other one who was it Sarah? I forgot Sarah's last name, but anyway.
You mean,
Virgin Channel show.
Sarah,
yes, but I wonder too if those shows were really possible because those were women of color stepping into roles which historically they had been, you know, prohibited from inhabiting. I think that's part of it also, but
for sure. I mean, you know, I'm not saying their appropriation should just, you know, I think it's complex, you know, it's
very complex, but I think the important thing, which I hear you reiterate again and again during this conversation, is that we need to keep talking. And we need to keep exploring each other's experience, you know. So and theater is certainly one way to do that.
Yeah, if you can only play yourself, then all you're going to think about is yourself, and pretty much that's what we do. We're pretty narcissistic culture as is. You know, I had the best therapeutic sentence ever given to me was, you know, you have to quit worrying about what other people think, because 95% of the time people are thinking about themselves. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, anyway, it was very useful for me at the time to remember that. So.
Very good. Any closing thoughts or comments? We might be winding down here, which is fine, but I wanted to provide anyone who has not spoken an opportunity to do so if you'd like to. This is a really rich conversation, Carl. I'm so glad we've been able to reconnect.
Yeah, me too. No students are going to risk a question. I mean, I'm
not sure if there's students on the call.
No students are on the call. All right. I was like, I know there were any students. It's all right. I didn't know if there were any students because I can't see faces, so
I can't tell. For better or worse, what I have done is made these conversations available via recording.
Yeah.
So I often think they, you know, they feel more comfortable.
No, it's all good.
Watching laptop later rather than real time. But again, we got to get back to that moment in time when, okay, we can talk in real time, in person, even face to face.
Even, yeah, God forbid. Yes, I know.
Oh my God.
Well, I really appreciate this, and I love all the work you do is, you know, just so important. And I know all of you at George Mason know what a rock star Angel is, and what he you know has done for the field of theater. I mean, you trailblazed, and when you ask that queer aesthetic question, I mean, you helped to create it. So so thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Many thanks to George Mason School of Theater, our Mason Players or Players for Change, Friends of Theater, and CVPA's Office of Marketing and Communication for their support in publicizing this event. And a special shout out to our program manager, Nick Horner, who's been working behind the scenes to facilitate a virtual space. And thank you again, the amazing P. Carl, for being with us. All of our discussions, including those with previous artists and scholars, are on our website. And we will keep talking next semester. We've slated Sharon Bridgeforth. Yes.
Yeah. Another queer setting. Oh my God. She changed my life the first time I saw her.
Absolutely. Recent winner of
her big love from me when she's there. Yeah.
I will. A recent winner of Yale's prestigious Wyndham Campbell Award in drama. And we've got another probably a shout out, good friend of yours, Tony Award winning actress and writer Lisa Crone will be with us next semester too. She wrote the book and lyrics for Fun Home. And then we'll have a third artist yet to be announced, but I hope that you'll join us for all of them, or as many as you can. In the meantime, be well, be safe, and whenever possible, be joyous. Thanks.
Thank you all. All right. Bye-bye.
Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.